Hi, I'm Chad with Move Forward Guitar. This lesson is from our series Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to explain drop 2 chords. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. But I am working on it as I'm filming this lesson, so if it's available, a link will pop up on the screen that will allow you to download it. If no link appears, you can look in the description and it'll say whether it's available or coming soon. And if it's not available yet, you can sign up for our mailing list and we'll send you a copy as soon as it is available. Also, if you're signed up for our mailing list, you'll receive all updated versions as well. But don't worry, you don't need the e-guide to follow along with this lesson because all of the charts will be on the screen. And also be sure to subscribe because we add at least one new lesson every day. This is part 3.4 from our series Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the last lesson I showed you close position triads and explained that a lot of the chord grips are really hard or even impossible for a lot of people to play. So in this lesson I'm going to show you drop 2 chords which are much easier to play, very commonly used, and you'll be able to get a lot of mileage out of them, so they're really worth learning, and this is a good way to play 7th chords. And I'm going to give a little bit of theory behind drop 2 chords and why they're called drop 2 chords, but I'm not going to dive too deep into it because the theory about these isn't that important. Understanding how these 7th chords are built, at this point you already understand that, so it's not really that important to understand everything about drop 2 chords or to go too deep into that, but I am going to give you a little bit of theory to show you why they're called drop 2 and how you construct them out of close position 7th chords. But the most important thing is just to memorize these, just to start working on them, start playing them, get them under your fingers, start memorizing them, and start using them in songs. That's more important than understanding the theory behind them. So first off, they're called drop 2 chords because in a close position triad like you have right here, you take the second to highest note and you drop it down an octave. And the second to highest note, or what's known as second to the top note, is right here. So no matter what set of strings you're playing, it would be second to highest because highest is down towards the floor if you're holding your guitar. So this is your highest note, this is your second note. So when we're talking about moving the second to highest or second to the top note, we're talking about this one, no matter what shape you're playing. So just start by looking at the highest note and go up one. So we're going to take that note and move it down an octave. And there's a couple ways we can do this. The first way is to move it down an octave to here. And if we do that, we would get this shape right here. The only problem now is that we have 2 notes on the same string, and you can't play a chord with 2 notes on the same string because you can't get 2 notes to ring out on the same string. So now what we're going to do is move the other 2 notes down to unison notes. And then you would end up with this shape. So what we've created here is a drop 2 major 7th chord in second inversion because you have the 5th on the bottom. So if you take a close position 7th chord in root position and turn it into a drop 2 chord, you're going to end up with a second inversion chord because you're moving that 5th. So that's one way to create a drop 2 chord, and with that we ended up on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings. There's another way to do it as well. So if we take this note, which is the note we move in a drop 2 chord, and instead of moving it to this octave, down to that octave, we move it down to this octave, which is the exact same note. It's just these 2 places are unisons to each other. So it's still the exact same note. We're just playing it on a different spot on the fretboard. So if we do that, we would end up with this shape. And right here you have a drop 2 chord. Just by moving that one note you can play this because they're all on different strings. But with drop 2 chords you typically don't skip a string because that's difficult to play. It's more difficult to play. So it's better to have them all on adjacent strings. That's the most common way to do it. So what you can do is now take this note, the one that's the highest note, and move it to its adjacent or to its unison note. And that's going to put them all on adjacent strings, and it'll be an easier chord grip. So now you still have a drop 2 major 7th chord in second inversion, but now you're on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th string. But really it is the exact same chord because all the notes are unisons to each other. This note was right here, this note was right here, this note was right here, and this note was right here. Those are all unison notes. So that's two ways you can change a close position 7th chord into a drop 2 chord, and that's why it's called drop 2 chord. You're moving the second to highest note down an octave. So that's a little theory behind them. Like I said, you don't really have to think about that too much, but that's why they're called drop 2 chords, and that's where they're coming from, out of the close position chords. And if you wanted to get the other inversions and root position of the drop 2 chords, you would have to take them out of the other inversions of the close position 7th chords. We started with the root position 7th chord in close position to get the second inversion. To get root position, first inversion, and third inversion, you'd have to do it from the other inversions of close position 7th chords. But you don't even have to think about that. You don't have to worry about that, in my opinion. All you have to do is look at the chord shapes and start getting them under your fingers and start in root position. For example, this is a drop 2 major 7th chord in root position starting on the 6th string. Just start in root position on whatever string set you're starting on and move up to the next closest intervals and play all your inversions that way and memorize them by playing them up and down the fretboard. You don't have to think about the close position 7th chords and how these are coming out of those, in my opinion. Just start in root position and start memorizing them. Start working on getting them down under your fingers and then start using them in songs, and eventually you'll just have them down, and the theory behind it doesn't really matter. So just like with inversions with triads, you're just going to take each of these notes when you want to get to the next inversion and move it to its next closest interval. So root always goes to 3, 5 always goes to 7, 7 always goes to root, 3 always goes to 5. So if you were to do that, you would end up with these notes. So your root's going to the 3rd, your 5's going to 7, 7's going to root, 3's going to 5. That gives you your first inversion. And then do it again, you'd have your second inversion. Do it again, you'd have your third inversion. And with 7th chords, you have up to the third inversion because of the 7th interval. With triads, we only had first inversion and second inversion, but because you have that 7th interval now, that's going to be one of the inversions, so now you have to the third inversion. So third inversion means that the 7th is the lowest note. And again, I'm not going to go over all these inversions. These are all in the e-guide. I also have lessons that show how to play all these inversions for drop 2, so you can go watch those if you want to, but they are in the e-guide. I don't want to make this lesson any longer just by going over all the inversions for all the different chord types. I would take forever. I just wanted to give you the concept behind it so you understand what drop 2 chords are and how to find them out of the close position 7th chords, and then how to find the inversions, which the inversions you find the exact same way you did with the triads. Just move up to the next closest interval. And drop 2 chords are spelled out like this. So in root position, it's always root 5, 7, 3. First inversion is always 3, 7, root 5. Second inversion is always 5, root 3, 7. And third inversion is always 7, 3, 5, root. So that's the formula for drop 2 chords. That's how they're always going to be laid out on the fretboard when you play them. And you can go back and check the diagrams and see that that's correct. For example, if we look at third inversion, that's supposed to be 7, 3, 5, root. Here's third inversion, we have 7, 3, 5, root. And you'll notice with these formulas that the root and the 5 and the 7 and the 3 are always next to each other. So here's a root and a 5, 7 and a 3. Here's a 3 and a 7, root and a 5, 5 and a root, 3 and a 7, 7 and 3, 5 and a root. So those always end up being next to each other when you lay them out on the fretboard. So if you look at third inversion, you have a 7 and a 3 next to each other and a 5 and a root next to each other. Second inversion, Same thing, here's a 5 and a root, here's a 3 and a 7. So that's how drop 2 chords are laid out. So those are drop 2 chords and how to build them. Like I said, these are very common shapes and very useful, so they're worth practicing, starting in root position on all the string sets and memorizing them, playing them up and down the fretboard, because you'll use them all the time if you play 7th chords. And again, I have lessons that show how to play them, so I'm not covering that in this lesson. This is a theory behind it, and they're also in the e-guide, so be sure to download the e-guide and you'll have them all in that. And move on to the next lesson where I'm going to show you another type of drop chord. I'm going to show you a drop 3 chord, and these are another type of 7th chord that are really useful and really common. And be sure to subscribe because we add at least one new lesson every day.